slideshow. Now it's my turn. Okay, so today you'll start already a paper exercise for hidden Markov models. I'll give you some insight in the principles, but next Friday, anything you would ever need to know about what you have to do in the next coming weeks will be told to you. That's a promise, okay? So if you think today, not too sure, you could be present next Friday, okay? That's one. This hidden Markov assignment starts with a paper exercise. You do a certain algorithm that's very important in hidden Markov modeling. It's called the Viterbi algorithm. I'll talk about that on Friday. And then from tomorrow, and that's a good thing because also tonight we've granted you a little bit of extension, mainly because of unclarity on our side that you had the best of all options. And that is the latest option. So tonight, by midnight, 1 minute before, that's what the system allows us to do, not 1 second before. Well, I should have done that. Midnight will be the deadline for the QDNA assignment. So that's and also today with paper exercise, the third and last assignment starts. And in that assignment, you know, it's quite nice. This might be for some the first time that you have already written an algorithm. Now you write a model, a full statistically correct model by which you can ask very general questions. And the example what you're going to work on is to predict the domain organization. I've shown you a couple of pictures. I've mentioned the word protein domain a number of times. So you're going to predict that. Domain in the sequence. Oops, probably linker. Oops, domain, you know. That's the prediction task, and you do this by training a hidden Markov model by a set of sequences where you know the domain organization. So you train your model on known data, and then you hope your prediction will be powerful. And you will train the models, and hidden Markov models have many parameters that all needs to be trained, and you'll do all of it. In Python 3, I think it is. Okay, before you're all there, today is just a graceful introduction with a paper exercise, and then you start doing. I would recommend you do not wait too long with starting this assignment, okay? There are people who've tried it, half a week before the deadline, okay, and then they come in and I see things in their eyes and the hairstyle where my conclusion is it's not a good idea, okay? And then we can't help you anymore. By the way, if you're that late. But don't worry if you do it. And hidden Markov, it sounds, we will talk about many parameters and so on, but basically it is bookkeeping. Two things that happen, the probabilities multiply. That's all you need to know. That's the theory. You can go home now. That's all. I'll talk a bit more. This is really the basic element, okay? And I'll show you. There we go. And by the way, people who taught me how to teach, all these courses, I'm not allowed to say it's simple to you. So if I say that, correct me, I should say it's not so simple, but that's not a problem. Okay, so that's what I will say for now. Not simple, but it's nice that it's not simple. But in fact, here there are some simple elements. Okay, so Markov models. Markov comes handily in place when you think about going to the casino. Throw dice there and hope you'll get rich. Markov modeling and Markov statistics show you that if you play against a bank account that is deeper than yours, such as that probably of the casino, you will always lose in the end, right? So in fact, save your money. Don't do it. But anyway, we'll even have an example from the casino and about the dishonest casino in a few moments. Markov models are come in place in series of events. Things happening after another. And it might be that there is a causal relationship, if event 1 happens, that has a profound influence on the next thing happening and perhaps the next thing, but it could also be a weak relationship or not a relationship at all. You know what to do, right, with probabilities when there is no relationship, but you can do that, right? Okay. So anyway, this is the basics behind Markov. It's about data and series. And what we use in the context of this course, the sequences are series of events, is feeding it a sequence. The first event being the first letter in the sequence, the second event being the second letter, and so on and so forth. Yeah? So that's our series of events. We'll feed these Markov models and hidden Markov models sequences, but they're interpreted by the Markov model just as a series of events. Okay? like throwing a dice, you know. By the way, let me ask you this. So, has anyone here a die with him or her? Doesn't matter. Say what you would do, each of you would have a die. You would throw it 100 times, diligently write down the number 3, 3, 4, 1, and so on, 100 times. And then you'll be the die yourself. So you make up a series by throwing 100 times a die in your head. So you write down, I now throw 3. Now I think I throw 6. You do that 100 times too. How difficult do you think to tell the invented row of 100 numbers, 1 to 6, from the thrown? The real event. It's very easy. You know why? Who has an idea?
We can't do random stuff.
We can't, yeah. Okay, but how can you see that? If you look at the numbers, and now you have two models. The real die and the fake die, or the mental die. Right? How can you tell these two models apart? And it's a very easy thing. If we throw, you think 6, okay, another 6. Okay, another 6, but now, certainly, 4, that's very unlikely. 4, 6, you don't do this. And die do this easily. 5 6s. 6 6s in a row of 100, there's a fair chance that you get 5 1s or 5 6s, it doesn't matter. And people don't do this. So just by counting these, that's already very good, right? So sometimes you see motif information that helps you discern, was this a real die, was this a fake die, or a mental die in this case, right? So that is basically what we try and do with Markov models. We try to elucidate from observed data what is happening here. That's basically, and then from that you can do all kinds of things like prediction. Okay, so we'll talk a bit about statistical background, conditional probabilities, even the Bayesian concept I'll explain briefly. Then today we'll talk about Markov chain models. I do them all. They're sort of simple hidden Markov models, but there's only one extension to a Markov model. Makes it a hidden Markov model. I'll talk about that. But today, and we do a bit, the theme will be, today at least, gene prediction. What kind of things can we see and see which is happening? What kind of scientific information can we use to predict where are gene regions? That's on the agenda for today. Okay. So a bit of statistics, a few slides. Okay, already started alluding to this. If you have two events, X and Y, happening after another at the same time, doesn't matter. If they're independent, you can just multiply the probabilities of each of them, right? Px times Py or Py times Px, it doesn't matter. But if two events, X and Y, are not independent, but are conditional, like if X has happened, Y is, you should know what happened to X to say something about event Y happening after X. And you talk about the conditional probability, and you say this is means to say this is the probability of an event Y given that X happened before. That's the conditional probability. And then again, if X and Y are independent, like here, this X doesn't matter. Sometimes this is, P of Y given X, but there is no dependence, so this is just the product of the two, of course. It's just Py then, because there is no dependency on X, and the other way around, of course, the same. If this is here the probability X given that Y happened, but there is no relationship, then it's just a chance for Px. There is no dependency, right? Good. So, a few other things we can do then. If however, there is a relationship between Y and X, so like here, Y happening first has an influence, or X happening first has an influence on Y in this equation, then what should you do? You have the conditional probability, the probability of event Y, given that X happened earlier. But if you want the full probability of the two, the idea is to calculate this. This is Y given X, because X is important for Y to happen. And then you should also know what's the probability of X, and then you know the total probability, right? These two you need. And then if the relationship is the other way around, that is the same thing. So X is first or Y is first for the second equation. Now, if you, for example, here, you say, okay, X is dependent on Y, and that means, I have a probability, Y is dependent on X, we have a probability of Y given X, then it could be that there are multiple X's that have an influence on Y, and then you're here. Here is when there are more Y things happening that have an influence on X, and then you have to add up these probabilities called the marginal probability, that if over all of the y's, the different model y's of the different event y's here, you add them up and you get your probability for x in the end. Looks like this, and then just add it over multiple events. And the same, of course, as we ordered this earlier, if x is y is after x. Okay, and in fact here we do already base. If you would now say this is in fact the same, so there is no time ordering, then you get this equation. If you would equate these two, then you can derive this equation from just this equal sign. Yeah? Oh, by the way, all of this is in your Durbin book. You can just read it in chapter. Okay? Okay, now basically this is meaning to say what I already did. So we have two models, for example. And you get two series of 100 throws, 100 die throws, numbers 1 to 6. You don't know what is what. One is the person doing it in his head, his or her head, and the other one really with a die. And the question is, how can you tell these apart? Now, I give you already a trick, what you could do, but still, suppose you don't know that. So then you need to observe, look at this series, having all kinds of observable parameters x, and you would like to find out, okay, there are two models, real die, mental die, which is what? So what have you got? The data itself doesn't tell you this is the mental, this is, but hopefully from the behavior of the two series you can tell them apart. So you have two models. Two models Y, the real die and the mental die, and they each produce, these two models produce output, the throws and the throws. And now you have to use that output to say something about what is the model. And that is the trick all the time with these types of statistics. So, you have a number of models. Real die, mental die. So these are the models Y. Each of these models have parameters. And now, and each of these models produces, as I said, some data X, the 100 numbers for each. And depending, of course, whether they were the real die or the mental die, that will be hopefully rise to a different series. If not, then there's nothing you can do. And then you want to tell, which is which, right? That's the point. Okay, so if you do this, and this comes directly out of this equation here, one more back, this one, if you rewrite this, then you can do that. So this is in fact the main Bayesian equation. If you have a condition that's dependent on x, and you want to calculate its full probability, then this evaluates to the probability of x given y times the probability of y divided by the probability of x. Okay, so how do we call this? And I'll make that clear with an example in a moment. This is called the posterior probability. We're all about y, and y we know is dependent upon x. This is a series we will have, we observe it, we try and learn, and this is why you call this the posterior probability. You learn about the probability of y given that you have a series of events. Here you see another one, here you say just py. So take that simple example we just had, the real die or the mental die. What's the probability? How more likely is it? If you would know that can help you, right? Well, there is a guy, his die is not always there. In 1 in 10 cases, he makes the series up in his head, right? And he throws them 9 times. Would that help you? Or you say, no, he's going 1 after 1. 1 with the die, and he makes them the next series in his head, and then again the die. That would also already, of course, have an influence. And this is called prior probabilities. What do you know in advance? That is, of course, the word prior comes from. Okay, so this was on an earlier slide, and then you see if you divide everything by px, multiply, you get right? Okay. So here we go. This is in the book, Durbin, this is the dishonest casino. It's just not an innocent person, making a series of throws up in his head. This is a casino, they try and make money. And they have a real die, and roughly you all know how a die works. It's a cubic thingy, you throw it, and basically the idea is that each of the numbers, 1 to 6, there are 6 sides, that the likelihood for each number to be on top is equal. So let's say 1/6 for each of them. Now, in this casino, they've made a dishonest dice with a bit of lead in it, and the lead is close to the 1 surface, so which number has a high likelihood to be on top? Very good. You know that they add up to 7. Great. Okay. Okay, so that's good to know. So the 6s come up, maybe with a higher likelihood. What do you think? So, and now you lose all the time your money, and you have this feeling of bloody hell. I think these guys are. I see 6 so many times. There's something is happening here. I can't get a handle. How can you tell apart? So you say, can I have a few? And you start throwing each of these dice. You start throwing numbers with them, and hopefully again, just like before, from the series you'll be able to tell. Hey, is this an honest die, or can you report to the police? These guys, here is one. It's clear from Markov tells me this is a dishonest die. Arrest the person. I don't know if that ever happened in history based on Markov evidence, but it's a nice thing to try. It's better than fake news, I can tell you. People get arrested on this. Anyway, so here we go. Here is our model. So we are on about, we want to know what's the likelihood of the die being loaded here, being dishonest. And let's say you observe that with the die you threw 3 6s in a row. Can that happen with a real die? Of course it can. I already told you, it can happen 5 times. But of course it happens maybe more likely with a dishonest, with a loaded die. So basically, given your series of throwing 3 6s, you ask the question, dear Mr. Markov, what would you say the likelihood of the loaded die would be, given this series? Now, here is this formula that I just showed you before. Here's the same thing here, just filled in. So here you see the opposite. Yeah, this is y, this is x, and here you see x given y, like you see here. You see this, reverse. So that means here it's a loaded die given 3 6s, and here you need the probability. Hey, what's the probability of 3 6s given a loaded die? You need to know something here. Times the prior probability of what's the likelihood that the die is loaded. How many of these fake dice do they have there? So we need a bit of parameter. If we know this, then we can do it. Now, let's see. There should be some input. Here you go. You need some input, right? And if you don't have input, you make something up. That's the beauty of Markov models. The prior probabilities you can make up. So what are we doing here? Oh, so here they say just 1 in 100 die is a big casino. They have hundreds of dice, and 1 out of 100 is a loaded die. Okay? But if the die is loaded, the chance for a 6 is 50% instead of 17% of just under there, right? 1 6. Okay, that's the difference. So, how does this evaluate now? Now you just start calculating. What do we have to do? By the way, I haven't said this. This is called the marginal probability. It should be somewhere here. Is it? Yeah, here, px. The marginal probability. What was that again? We've had this one. Sorry, we don't get back. That is that you multiply over all of these prior probabilities. You're adding. So, okay. Let's calculate. Here we are. So, how can we get to this? Here is already an answer. So, this we need to calculate the posterior probability after having learned from our series of 3 6s. So we need this first. What's the likelihood of throwing 3 6s with a loaded die? Who can tell me? What was the probability of a 6? If the die was loaded, we can say something about it. It was half. How do you throw 3 6s? It's pretty independent. Is the die throw after, is that dependent, do you feel, or not? Independent. Now you have a very fluffy die, very soft one. And you change the shape if you throw. Then there is, but normal dice it won't happen. So let's say, okay, it's independent. So basically then, that's nice. So that means if the chance for throwing a single 6 is 0.5, then the chance to throw 3 6s in a row is 0.5 times 0.5 times 0.5. Okay. What is this? This is this prior probability of having, so what fraction, and that's we know it now, because here is that information, 1%, so here you go, times 1%. If you wouldn't have known anything, what might you have taken? What I would have done, I can tell you what you would do, I would say, okay, I don't know anything, let's take both half. You don't know anything, let's see what happens. But here we know better, we have a better idea of the prior, so we use that. 0.1. What is this? This is just the probability of throwing 3 6s. By what? Well, by any die, right? We don't know. So what do we do then? Then you add these two probabilities. It could have been a fake die, or the dishonest die, the loaded die, or it could have been the normal, the honest die, right? And that's this. So this is the probability, well, we had before basically here, that probability, 3 times throwing with a loaded die. And what is this? Plus marginal probability. What is this? If we're throwing a 6 with a real die, it's just 1/6 chance, right? Times the likelihood of that, and that was the 1 in 100, so this is 99%, this is 1%, right? So far as bookkeeping, do you see? Bookkeeping, that's all. You need to fill in the right numbers in the right place, you know, it's not really difficult, but that is, I shouldn't say this, it's maybe for some difficult, but it doesn't matter. But it's like filling in the right numbers in the right place. Okay, so, and then if you calculate this or use a calculator, then there is 0.21. What might be interesting is, you know, another question. What would happen if you throw 4 6s in a row with any of the two dice? Would that give me more evidence? Well, it would, but better evidence. Can I now make a firmer assertion? And here you go. If you do this, what will change here if you do this? What will change in this formula? Now 4 6s. Not so much will change, right? 0.5 to the power 4 here. What would happen here? 0.5 to the power 4 times 0.6 to the power 4. That's it. You calculate it. But you get 2. So this is the chance after the series, and that's interesting in itself. Think about it. The posterior probability after you know, 3 6s have been thrown is now 0.21. What was the prior probability when we didn't know so much before we threw? 0.01. So we've gone up by factor 21, right? We know 21% more sure. So the accusing finger, this die is fake, is 21 stronger. Now look, it goes up to 45.45 if you have 4 6s, and with 5 6s, 0.71. And it will go up, it will even creep up to 1 probably. But of course, you know, it will never reach it, right? That's what you have with probabilities. Anyway, so you're never totally sure. But maybe in a court case, you know, I've thrown 1,000,000 times with these dice, and you know, I'm very tired now. The probability is 0.98. 99 probably or something. I don't know, you do it. You can even calculate, fill in this number to 1,000,000 each, and you'll find out, you know, what it will give you. Okay, so this is in Durbin, that's what you have. So basically, marginal probability, so all, you know, the total probability of throwing the series in this case, the prior probability, and the posterior probability. So the beauty maybe of all of these models, also hidden Markov models on Friday, will be you have a prior, and you refine your prior, you learn about the system, and now you know have a better probability in the end, given that you had a series that you can use for observations. Right? That's the beauty of Markov modeling and hidden Markov modeling. Now you know what mathematicians like. They don't like plus signs, and they don't like these signs so much, but they love these types of signs. You know that? Integral. You've had this in your math classes. I think you love them too now, right? Promise me that. Very good. And so here you go to the continuous case, where you see that, you know, this is basically the marginal probability, but now you don't have just 2 models or 3 models. Now you have, you know, each time slice is a different model. So you have very many, and you need to go to an integral of a function in the mathematical term together. But this is totally the same principle, the Markov, the Bayesian principle. And again, a posterior probability derived out of a prior probability with knowing something, some series data. Okay. Good. Some other issues. So we have a distribution. There are always then 2 distributions you have to have. You have, you know, your prior distribution. What is the chance for each of the models? And then you get a posterior distribution. And they will be different. Like here, the probability of the loaded model was 0.01 prior, 0.21 as a posterior. So, you know, if you have these chances will be different than, you know, if you compare the prior to the posterior for each of the models. So that means you have 2 distributions. You have a prior distribution, there's all of these likelihoods of these models, and the posterior one. And here are a few of the things that, you know, are mathematically important. You won't in your assignment. I don't think you will lose any second of sleep. I hope at least over this slide when you do your assignment, because it won't come up. But anyway, so they talk about conjugate distribution. That is basically the form of the prior. It's a normal distribution we have for the prior. And hey, even after the Markov model, the posterior probability is also a normal distribution. Should it necessarily be the case? No. Could be anything else. But if that is the case, they talk about conjugate distributions. And what kind of distribution people talk about? The normal one, the binomial one, a beta distribution is there. Multinomial, Dirichlet is part of So, and I'll talk about, you've heard this word already. You're happy you recognize something here at least. Pseudo-counts. We'll get into that in a moment as well. Okay. But what is important to say, and you'll find this out in your assignment for sure, how you guess your prior. Is that 1% to 99% or just half-half? Will of course make a difference in what you get. Right? So it's important to spend a bit of time in thinking, dreaming up a good prior probability distribution. All right, here we go. Let's dive into it. Your very first maybe Markov model. Now, what is it? Again, it looks terribly complicated, but this is a graph, and what is a graph in essence? It's a series of dots. Now we call them states and connectors, arrows. If it's a directed graph, Markov models will be arrows, all directed graphs. But of course, you can go from one to the other and back again, so you can walk always in both ways, if you want, if you make them. Now, so what is happening now? We have this series events, and what does this mean? If you walk this arrow, what have we got? We talk in fact about the conditional probability of G, given that A happened before, right? So if we know this probability, what is that at that moment? And we know this transition probability, that's now called a transition probability, the arrow, then you can just calculate G. And here you see it filled in. The orange ones, I think, are now here calculated. So here you go. This is again the conditional probability. For example, what is the probability of being that in your series you find an A? So where are we for A? We're here. And how can you get to A? So if before you had a G here, given that your earlier state was a letter G, what is your probability? That is this transition probability. Right? The 0.16. You see this for others, the 0.34. C given G. G given G, what is that? Which arrow is that? G given G. In the model. This one, right? Going back to itself. So that's how you work with this. Yes, a question.
How do you get to the transition probabilities?
How you get these probabilities? Now you're asking an important question. So, that's very good. We have to train them. You learn how to train them. So, an important part of the Markov model, you see it already, is having a good idea of these probabilities. And you know what? You start, have you got any clue? No! How could you ever get to some sense of these parameters, you think? Well, basically, you'll find this out later on, that you use training data. You feed it data where you know enough to be able to get a good sense of your visual performance. But that, now there is an algorithm, training algorithm, we'll talk about this on Friday. Okay? So part your question, be there on Friday. Alright, so this is how you work with it. And what do you see as well? A few things here. How could you start in a Markov model? The basic answer is you could start in any state. For example, if this would not have been there, so where would you start if you give it a series, if your input is a sequence? Well, just where the letter, say your sequence starts with a T, you would start here, right? And so on. So now, we do one extra thing. We say, no, fair play, you can demand that you start somewhere orderly. Your choice. You can put in a begin state or not. This model has begin state. So, this gives you a few more probabilities then. Because now you need to fill in, okay, if I always start here, then I need, of course, transition probabilities to any other letter in your model. Now say, you know what, I only want to, let me ask you a question. How would you do this? Can you model this already? I want to recognize sequences that only start with an A. I don't want to see anything else. Sequence that doesn't start with an A should have a probability 0. What will I do with this model? What will I fill in here for these 4 parameters, you think?
Make begin A1 and the rest 0.
This one you make 1, right? This, and then the rest is 0. Done. See, Markov is great. You ask a question, and you can easily answer the question. So this sort of stuff are you going to do?
Question.
Yeah?
Can you remove the beginning and say that A is your starting?
You could, but that's basically what we did now, right?
But instead of drawing.
Yeah, but then then how do you say you don't have this? How do you demand you start in an A? You have to say something in your program extra. This is the proper way or the well-defined way of doing it. Okay. Good. So what have we got? A Markov model, chain model is defined by a set of states. States. Ah, that's also true. Some states, we saw that here, that's interesting, right? Okay, I didn't say that. I should basically go back. So, what does it mean? You give it a sequence. You feed it a sequence. The sequence, let's say I feed it this sequence. Is there something? No. Okay, I'm going to get away with it. Let's see. Doesn't matter. ATG, who knows what that is, by the way? What is ATG in biology? The codon, one word in front. Universal, almost. Start codon. Anyway, we feed the start codon as our sequence, ATG. How will we run through this model? A first, so you agree? A, and then what? T, how do we go? We go diagonally like this, and then we go to G, so we go up here. And then we're done. So we pass the states, and you know, so this is how you go to the model. And that means, if you execute the model, that's what we just did, then you say, there are states that emit symbols, so if you go in state A, the Markov model says, ping, A, so you've emitted an A, right? Boop, out of the box, A. And then you go here, and the Markov model says, T, ping, T comes out of the cupboard, T, emitted. And then you go to G, so you've emitted that sequence ATG. Yeah? So the Markov, but what happens if you do here? You start here, but what does the cupboard go open? Ping! No, this is a silent state. This doesn't emit a symbol. This is before the sequence, if you like, right? To begin. You want to begin somewhere. So you have the emitting states, these ones. They have a letter, so they emit that letter. And this is a state that doesn't emit. Huh? There's no sequence begin or something, not, at least not in DNA. Is it in proteins? Begin? Tell me. What about this letter B, guys? You can get away with the letter B. It's not an amino acid, but it's used in many alphabets if there is uncertainty between an aspartate and an asparagine. But anyway, so now again try this one. So some states emit, so you have states. Some emit symbols, some are silent. That's why you can put. So all the states begin to are silent, right? And then you have a set of transitions. How many? Basically, all pairs, right? In two directions. Basically, a full matrix of transition probabilities. Yeah? How many states have you got? Say n. In this case, it was 5 states, you might say, with the beginning state. So you'll have a 5 times 5 matrix in which you can fill in all of these transition probabilities. Right? Where are the diagonal numbers of this matrix? Which transition probabilities are those? These guys, right? The selves. But at least we can do all of the probabilities. So that's the idea. Okay, so here we are. Yeah. Okay, so now what do we all need to have a Markov model? We do it once again. Now a bit more, you know, in compute speak. We need, of course, if we want to execute, do something, we need to give it a series of events. We need to execute it as something. So you need an input, right? It's not part of the model, but it needs an input. A series of events, a sequence in this course. Yeah. Then we have the states. So you have, you might have a sequence of states, and then here, that's also what you need. What are the initial? Where do I start in my model? What's the initial probability? And we can be quite simple in our model here, for example. If we start here, what's the probability distribution? Where is there a probability distribution of starting in any of the states? Yes, but what is the probability distribution? 1 for the begin state, 0 for A, 0 for these. Yeah? That was your question? Where should I start? So here you go. You could say, even if you want, okay, I do another distribution over it. I say, it's equal, it's 0.2 everywhere. So the likelihood you begin state, but you could do anything. So that is what you can do to execute. If you have a series of events, you need initial probabilities of the states. What is the likelihood that I start somewhere? And in this case, it's a 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. Because you start in the begin state. And you need this transition matrix that has as a dimension n, if that is the number of states you have in your model. I said bookkeeping, right? You need to bookkeep. Do it in a precise way, then you're fine. And programming is in fact also sort of bookkeeping, and hopefully in a creative way, but you need to be precise, right? The Apollo 13, it's before you were born, I think. That was, that was in the time of Fortran programming, a very old programming language. Anyway, the thing flew up. It was designed to go to the moon. It did, but we couldn't land. There was a problem. It had to go past. There's been a nice movie, and the whole world was watching. I was a young child sitting at night. My parents granted me to stay up. That was something, I can tell you, in a Dutch family. That never happens. And I was allowed to watch television in the night. And it landed, and the astronauts came out okay. It was amazing. Anyway, what was the cause of this? Literally a semicolon error in a Fortran module. Small mistakes sometimes can have quite drastic results, right? That is what you have with programming sometimes. Hopefully modern languages do not lead to these catastrophes anymore, but you say something in a different way and somebody understands it differently. The accent in words. How many Dutch are there here? Gisteren is de vorstin gevallen. Right? You understand what I'm saying? Yesterday the queen dropped. Gisteren is de vorst ingevallen. What does that mean? It started freezing. Same, just an accent different, and there you go. Whole different meaning. Anyway, that can happen in programming as well. Be careful. Anyway, so what are we going to do? And I already started talking about this. You feed it a series of events, and what we want to, how will we now calculate a whole series of events? So, let's go to this model. Let's say, what is the likelihood of that sequence ATG? How would you calculate the likelihood? Okay, now that is given that A, so we start ATG, right? So we go this. That's what we want. So we start at the begin state, so what do we need to know? We need to go to A, we need to know this transition probability. Then we're in A. Then where are we going? To T, we need to know this transition probability. And then we go to G. So how are we going to calculate it? What is now the total probability of this series, ATG? That is G, given that we had T, T given that we had A, and A given that we started in the begin state. These are the probabilities. A question over there. Yeah?
Does the probability also depend in what place you are in the sequence? Like if you're going
Yeah.
further in the sequence, you have another probability?
Well, yes. Here, for example, if you see clearly, right? There's an A, there's a T here, a clear one, and a G here. Absolutely clear. I've switched on the light and you will see it. But you remember, ATG, that's our series, okay? And well, can I already say something about this? You see these probabilities are different. So yes, it makes really a difference where you are in your, what happens the next arrow you need to walk through, or just the total probability. It makes a difference. But basically, what are we going to calculate to have it's in fact, it's the product of four, what is it? It's 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. It's the product of 3 probabilities. This probability, that probability. Okay, so that's what mathematicians try to write in a thing that looks different, difficult. This is if you feed it a series. So here you go. We work from the back, from the last letter, which is the letter L, and we say, okay, we talk about the probability basically of having the last letter given anything that happened before. But what is that anything that happened before? You could say, aha, but this one then, what is that? That is what is the probability of XL minus 1? So the penultimate letter, the before last letter is, of course, what happened before that. That was L minus 2 happening before. Yeah? This is the last letter, this is the letter before that, and this is the letter before the penultimate letter. Okay? And so on and so forth. Until you are at the begin state. And then that's it. I'll go back before time, right? So, basically, what is the key property of a first order Markov chain? Because that is what we're talking about here. What is a first order Markov chain? This is a first order Markov chain, the one I showed you. How good is our memory here in this Markov model? We have a long series, but at each point in the sequence, what do we say? I only need to know what? 1 letter back in the past. Could you make it for 10 letters back in the past? Of course you could. It's a bit more cumbersome. But we'll show how this can be done. But here we say, no. Only 1 in history. I need to remember, then I know the probability. That's enough. So if you do that, and most Markov models do that, by the way, then you have just this. All these probabilities. L given x L minus 1 times the probability of L minus 1. All these probabilities we just did. All these arrows, basically. These are just the arrows in this, in a Markov model. You multiply the 3 arrows to this. That's this. And this is this horrible sign again. You remember that one? Have you come to terms with that one? This is, instead of the sigma, this is the multiplication thing, right? Over all of the states. Okay. So basically, what is this? This is the begin state. Is there a probability into the begin state? No. But there is a probability of being in the begin state, which normally will be 1. But okay. So this is the whole, so you just multiply all of those arrows in the model. Okay? That's just what you do. Okay, so here we are, the Markov chain. Yeah, and here is then, if we put this, what I just said here, for a sequence that reads, which sequence have you got here? The sequence GGT. So, what is this? This is what you have. Yeah. T given G, G given G, this G given C, and then C is your starting letter. So that's just this begin probability. Okay? So this is how you execute these models. Do you see a difference? Now we have more fun even, right? We not only say, I want the user to start in the begin stage, you know what, I want this person to end in the end state. You can do that. But then you have a few more probabilities you need. Now you need also transit probabilities from... Yeah? In the earlier model, I said, how could you remember that? How could you demand the sequence should start with the letter A? If there would not have been an end state, how can you demand that the sequence would end with a T? You cannot. Can you now? Of course you can. How would you now encode that the last letter in the sequence has to be a T, must be a T? This probability goes to 1, and the other orange ones go to 0. You've done that, okay? So you get more expressivity when you have begin states. Right? Okay, so this again, so the transition probability is defined like this. And what is this arrow in the model? This is just the arrow from xi minus 1 to the next letter in the sequence, if you like. Xi is just, of course, this. And that's the arrow, right? This is a good thing. Yeah? And here again, you have, this is, I think, in the Durbin book. If you have the begin state, then you just multiply all of these transition probabilities along the path you take through the model. Okay? That's basically it. Okay, now that's it. Now we make it one more step more complicated. Yes?
I don't get what the F is. No, the slide you were on.
This one? Ah, okay. I go back to the picture to clarify this. We have this model. And, where do we start in the model? We need to start somewhere, right? So we give it a sequence. Do we start somewhere? In what state do we start? Here it's not so difficult to answer. But suppose the begin state wasn't there. What is the likelihood of, you have to start somewhere. You need to give that a probability. So you just say, okay, we have in total 5 states here. And I could say in advance, you know what, to start there is 0.2 for each of them. You wouldn't do this in this case, because what do you want? You always start here, so what will your probabilities be? 1 for this one, from starting there, and 0 for the others. That's that thing that you see there.
But isn't it to the power of T, or
No, there's just a single probability of being somewhere.
But
If you go on, if you from that T then go to another, then you're talking about it.
if you go to the slide where it says the F,
That's transposed, right? It's transposed.
Oh, that T! Oh, sorry. That's just a transposition. Thank you for helping me out. That's what you mean. This one.
yeah.
Yes, not to the power T. This means transposed. This is a vector that reads like this. That's all. That's what mathematicians do, yeah. Terrible people, I know. So, you write a series like this, but you would like it to have like this. And, paper, if you type, it's easier to type like this than to type like that. The old typewriter. Do you know what a typewriter is still? With noise, right? And then went to the next line, and so on. Yeah. As a boy, I always liked to touch many keys at the same time, very forcefully. My dad was always angry with me for some reason I've never have understood it. Anyway, on the computer you can do this. Normally. Don't leave with an Apple laptop, by the way. Okay, so what have we got here? We have an actual thing, because now we get a miracle. Watch the picture. You will remember something, but there will be a new element. I think the picture comes in. What was the same? I can tell you. There are transition probabilities. There are arrows. There is a begin state. There are 4 states. But within each of these states, now something has happened. We don't have a single letter we can emit. Now we have a probability within each of the states of emitting, in this case, any of the 4 possible DNA letters. Right? So that means, let's go quickly back to this model. Here we are. If you get a letter A in the sequence, where are you in the model if it's emitted? Is that hard to tell? Not so hard, right? Only that one. And what state are you if you see a letter T in the sequence? Not so difficult. There. Okay? Now answer the same question. I see an A in the sequence. Where am I? Could be there. Yeah, could be there. You could even say, well, it's in a sense, it's more likely that you're here with an A than here. Why am I saying that? Because this is 0.4, that's 0.1. But you're not sure. You don't know. The word hidden comes from this. Okay? Basically, in geek speak, you say the state that is emitted by, the letter that is emitted by a box, by a state, is decoupled from your path you take. It could be that you have a letter, you have a path in the sequence, and now you say, oh, A here. But maybe sometime further in the sequence there's another A, and you emit that A being in this box. It's all possible, okay? And I'll show you that in a moment. This is hidden. There is a book, Essential Bioinformatics. It's a pretty good book. Have you seen it? You can easily do something on the internet, and I say nothing anymore, right? I don't know how to, because of the bookstore. So there they thought hidden, they had a more fantasy idea, so they said pathways are now hidden, and they had parts of the, yeah, look in the book, it's funny, but incorrect. Anyway, there was a question there, yes?
Here when it says the couple, it means we calculated, it's just the probability that was extracted, so for instance this, the orange A, or the couple, the immediate probability will be all of the...
Well, we'll use it, we will, executing a sequence will mean, you have letters, so the sequence is A, C, T, G, 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 A or something, right? So you start, you go up to, for the first A in the sequence, and maybe later on you say G, G here, and then you go, you go here, and then you say A here, for example, right? So it means, in the Markov model, if you had a letter in your sequence, you know exactly what stage you are. It was only an A state. In the T state. Now, you can't say where you are from being in where you are in the C. That's decoupling. But it will be clear in a moment. Because we're going to use it as you speak now. Yeah? You'll listen to this and then see if you still have your question, okay? Alright, so we have an example. We are going to execute or emit the sequence AAC using this model we just had a moment ago. In how many ways? Now, who can, does this make sense? Would you see this orange pathways? Could that indeed emit the sequence A? How would it walk? How would the pathway go if you emit ACC via the orange pathway? Fill me in, please. You start in the start state, right? That's a given. Then where do you go? Well, it says up. So it's probably half. Then you have the first letter A must therefore be this letter. There's no other possibility. So the first letter A is in this box. What do you see here? You see these letters are for the state. This is state 0, state 1, state 2, state 3, state 4, state 5. Here they are. So here is the completely defined pathway you take for this sequence. So what do? We start at 0, we go to 1 for the A. Then what do? We go back into 1 for which letter? The next A, and then what do? We go over to this state here, and then what do we emit then necessarily here? No other way, the C, because we had given out the A and the A already. So you could express or emit your sequence AAC by walking like this up back, out. What probabilities do you encounter if you do all of this? 0.5, this 0.4 in the state, this 0.2 for the transition probability, this 0.8 for the transition probability, oh, and another one, another 8, this 0.8 for the transition probability, and this C for the emission probability, and another probability, 0.6 transition probability. Now we have two types of probabilities. We have the old transition probabilities, the arrows, and these one we call from now on emission probabilities. What letter is actually used? So if we are this, once again, this sequence, first letter, begin at the end state, you go up, transition probability is 0.5, and now you use the first A in this box as an emission probability of 0.4. Okay? Okay, now let's see. Are there other possible pathways? Well, very many actually. Here are two more. Let's see what happens. What is interesting to know, it might be interesting, think about dynamic programming. Were there many pathways possible? Yes, there were. You calculated them all. What did you choose in the end? The highest scoring one. Let's see what happens here. Let's just take another one. This is what? 3. So this is going up. Not do this, but now you immediately go over, and then you go back one time in here, and then you're out. 3 letters, right? So what would that mean? Here you go. What do we get to do this? So that means you go in, you emit the letter A, you go on. Now you need the second A, you're still doing the same sequence. So you emit this A here, not 0.4 but 0.2 as an emission. You go back in via 0.4, and you do the last letter C, and out you go. If you calculate, and what you do is you multiply all of these transition parameters and emission parameters on the way. That is what you now do. Before in Markov you only did transition probabilities. Now you also take into account these emission probabilities. And here you go. Here are them. Look, this is the pathway. What was this again? Like this. Go back in. Second A. Go through the letter C out. How do we calculate this? Bookkeeping. 0.5 for this transition. 0.4 for seeing state, letter A in the state. 0.2 back in. This transition plus 0.2 here. The next one will be the letter A again. The 0.4 here. What is this 0.8 now? Is this transition probability going to the next one? What is the 0.3? Who knows? Probability of the C in this box. And what's the 0.6 then? The probability out to the end state. Bookkeeping. You need to be in the proper box, in the proper arrow, nothing can go wrong. That's what you do. So let's take another pathway, let's see what happens. So you do this, you calculate, same probability. Both could be chosen. But now we go 1, 2, 2, 4, 5. Does that mean we go now like this? In, back, through, out. But now under, well, check it. This is now, and what do you see? The double probabilities. This is a better path under than on top. Okay? That's how you do it. So we take a small rest. I see some people who have seen so many probabilities. There's a question here. Let's do that one.
So, the different states, the transition states, are not based upon like a nucleotide. So they're not based on...
The transitions are based on 2 nucleotides, if you like.
Yeah. But
being in one and going to another.
Yeah, but the states aren't. Like
the states are just dependent on the letter you are in.
So you're comparing all the possible states for all the possible transition, all the possible...
That's what we in the end will do. That's why you need computers, I can tell you.
Okay.
And then you need to train all possible settings for all possible parameters.
Okay.
So you have a computational problem here. Okay? Oh, guys, question.
We have the same probabilities for both.
What do you mean by both?
For the first, second, and third. So
Ah.
we have the same number.
What happens if you do your dynamic programming? And there are 20 million many pathways you calculate the same score. What do you do? high road or something. Just pick one, right? You didn't say here, probably. Yeah, but it could happen.
Anders zou je die heeft die eerste 2
Break.
keer gepakt en die tweede zou je ook 2 keer kunnen pakken. Net
Als je niet echt goed zit. Maar wat er gebeurt is inderdaad bijvoorbeeld dus meerdere most popular classes.
Why is a hidden Markov model called a hidden Markov model? If you feed it a sequence and you get a probability out, a pathway has been walked through the model to emit that complete sequence, each of the symbols. But if you just have the score, you have no clue how that path has been, because it could have been over or under or whatever. Right? And if you have a very big Markov model, you could imagine that there are a multitude of different pathways. Yeah? That is not the case. Once again, I won't go completely back to the hidden Markov model, because then there was just an A here, a T there, so you know exactly, if you have a letter in your sequence, you know exactly in what state you have been. So if you have a score for the sequence, you just know the states that sequence necessarily has gone through. That is the case for Markov models, not for hidden Markov models, and that's why people talk about the decoupling of the pathway and the sequence. Yeah? The same sequence can be emitted by different pathways. And if you're outside the box, you don't know which pathway has been taken. That's the decoupling, that's the hidden aspect, okay? It's nothing deeper than that. And I know people are thinking about what hidden might mean. I'll give you this example, essential bioinformatics. Have a look if you want to see some nice error and a funny story made by somebody who thought he was trying to understand hidden Markov models, but really didn't. That happens too sometimes. But anyway, that's what is the hidden aspect. Now, what we just did, calculating these pathways, you'll start doing this on your paper exercise in a moment. Here you are. This is a letter, a DNA letter, and methylation means that something is attached to one of the letters in DNA, and that letter normally is a C. The letter C is likely to undergo a transformation, something is attached to it, and that's a methyl group. And a methyl group, who knows, is CH3. Okay. Anyway, doesn't matter, just something extra. What's the effect of that normally? If that happens in a gene region, and the things are built onto it, then that gene is expressed less. The protein, if you like, that is encoded by that gene region on the DNA will become less in the cell. And if that protein is important, and it should be there in a large abundance, that is not a good idea. And for most genes are there for a reason, and of course the thing needs to be expressed, otherwise there's no purpose for that gene. So basically, you read those slides, it doesn't matter. So CPG islands, why CPG? I had to think as a student for hours, because nobody explained to me. I had no sympathy points, but now I've got them all right. Absolutely. Okay, very good. I'll try to go again, see if you cry. So anyway, this means just in the sequence of the DNA, a G following a C. Because what could you misunderstand if you think about the CG? Who knows a nice important name? 2 names. Base pairing with 2 names in front of it. Watson-Crick base pairing. What is that? Who knows the pairs? The regular pairs. Can you tell me? The 2 pairs. AT and? So if you read CG, what do you think? 2 ways to explain that. It's just a G after a C in the sequence, or no, now we're talking about a Watson-Crick base pair. Now, to make that absolutely clear, and therefore it sent me astray, CPG means we're not talking about the Watson-Crick base pair, we're just talking about the G following a C in a sequence. Okay? Now, that's very nice. And what happens if you have this, a C and a G in the sequence, that C is very likely to be methylated. Meaning, if it's in the gene region, that gene will be used less optimally, say. So, and that the reason is, and I slide this is just with the chemistry, like to look at that. I skip this for now, maybe go back, and this is important. So, if that is the case, CG is bad in a sense because that C is going to be methylated, that goes against the purpose of the gene. Where would you think they would be, in a gene region or not? You would immediately say, oh, there should not be so much in a gene region then, because they're bad news, right? What happens? It's biology. Because methylation is bad in gene, we know that in gene regions. There is a whole mechanism to suppress methylation in gene regions. And now the CG says, oh, I'm not methylated at all. You know what? I put in more CGs in a gene region because it's not bad. So, because these are masked. So what's the observation? And that's the only thing for now you need to. We are going, so the abundance of CG in the sequence part now happens more closer to a gene, and you can use it to predict the likelihood that there is a gene. Basically, you look at DNA, CT, AA, C, whatever, and then you see CG, AA, CG, T, CG, ooh, lots of CGs. This might be telling there would be a gene here or there. Oh, great. So, when, how do you trust it? How should you score it? Now, if you want to do this, so how do you use this? You give it a number of biological sequences, this system. You train that. And then you try and you get the idea of the strengths of CG to be able to score the likelihood that there will be a gene in that region. Once again, indirect information, circumstantial evidence to be able to try and tell when there is a gene region. So for now you need to just remember, in gene regions, if you like, there are more instances of CG than you would normally expect. In the task now we use a Markov model, and we will hit a Markov model in a moment, to see if we can predict how that could work. Alright, now, one bit of biology then. Well, you know, if you have cell division, what happens? You might know. The DNA is split into two strands, and then each of the strands is completed again in the daughter cells. And what happens if you have one of these CGs methylated? This one, for example, is methylated here, and this one is being built. And what happens? In later generations, you only get methylation if the opposite one is methylated. So biology, this is in fact something that is not so much DNA. Because, you know, this is CG and this is CG. This one gets methylated and this one not. Why? Because on the other side there is one. This is called epigenetics. This is an epigenetic phenomenon. What is this? It's not purely the letters in the DNA, but stuff that happens around, if you like. You need more information. Okay? That's interesting in itself. But for now, for the exercise of today, just remember, we're looking for more frequent CG happening than you would normally expect. Can we pick that up? Now what is complicated. Alright, there we go. So, what are we going to do here? So we're going to zoom in on, indeed on the CPG islands. So how can we, that's the general question, and how can we determine the probability parameters of the model? What do we want to do? We want to make a model, a CPG model. Remember the mental die or the false die and the honest die. So here we have a model, maybe CPG, and we need some normal model. Let's say we need another model, random model, against which we can compare. Okay, and the approach we're going to take is the maximum likelihood approach. What does that mean? If I want to observe models that recognize CPG regions, I would like that model to score those regions high. I would like to recognize sequences with CPGs that the model says, look, high score, this is one, right? If it said, mediocre score, everything scores mediocre. Yeah, but it comes out. So you want difference in score, and the score should be high. And one way of getting there is maximum likelihood. You would like to maximize the likelihood that the model recognizes that thing you want it to recognize. In this case, CPG elements. Okay? Basically, if you write this in a mathematical way, you say you have a set of data, D, and then here is the set of parameters describing the model, and you would like to say that the probability of observing this data should be maximally given the model. Yeah? The model should score the highest for the CPG islands. The data should be scored maximally. If I give it sequences with lots of CPG islands, the score should be high, should be maximum. Okay? And mathematicians say then, look the data D will become likely given the model. Okay, an example. Here we have a set of sequences. Do you see CPG islands? Look, exciting, right? Small island, okay, but it's one, right? Fantastic. Okay, is this sequence doing it? Not so good, right? Okay, anyway, this is the input. And now we want to start saying, you know, what's the likelihood of each of the letters, right? So I want the prior probabilities for a letter A, C, or a G, or a T. What would you do? This is your data set. As always, start counting, right? How many A's, how many T's? That's your starting probability. So here you go. Apparently in this case, we have 6 A's. You could count and test, I don't know. So out of 30 in all, 3 sequences of 10 probably here. So 0.2. So these are the probabilities. They should add up to 1, by the way, right? Okay, now I think another example will come. You see the difference between the sequences? Something nasty happened. Mutations. All letters A have gone into G's. Quick evolution, I admit. But okay, next slide, evolution. But anyway, so what now? Start counting. What have we got for the likelihood for A? Do we like the 0? What will ever happen with an A that I would see? What would that do with our model, you think? The probabilities will be multiplied. There is 0 in your series of what happens with the probability? 0. That means, if we would do this, that any sequence with a great CPG island series, that there is an A in the sequence. Sorry, dead on the spot. Not good. We need to do something. This is where pseudo counts, and I mentioned that, come into place. Who knows a cheap way to avoid? Could ask the question like this. What would you do? Do something practical. Mathematicians might scream in horror, doesn't matter. Do something. What would you do? You hear the word pseudo count? Here we are all about counts, or we have pseudo count. Cheat. Please, do cheat. This is good.
As an extra A, C, G, and T.
If you give, you know, before I start counting, I give them all 1. How's that? Brilliant! No zeros anymore. You know, the real frequencies are a bit biased now, perhaps. You know, you draw them into all being the same, right? But, you know, small price to pay, perhaps, for a point. Okay, so that's the first possibility. If you want to do that, give them all a 1 before we start counting. That's this. Then this is pseudo counting. Yeah? So you count the number of A's. That was 0 here, I think. But, you know, you gave it a pseudo count 1, so you get 1 divided by, and of course, so here it is, A now is not 0 divided by 30 anymore, it's now 1 divided by 34. Not 0 anymore. That's a great help. What happens with the C likelihood? Here it was 9 over 30, now that becomes 10 over 34. It's not exactly the same, but close enough. Yes?
Why would you not choose to not include A into the count if you don't see any A's?
Yeah, but then you can't work with the sequences that have an A anymore. You have an input sequence.
Okay. Yeah.
There is an A in. Fantastic sequence. Loads of CPG. Probability 0. Yeah, you can't cheat in a hidden market model, right? You have to include all the probabilities. Okay. So this is a cheap way, pseudo counts, to deal with those things. But it could also be that you say, look, this is about, so what is the pseudo count? You can say this is cheating. You could also say, no, this is my prior probability. What am I actually saying? My prior probability for each of the 4 letters is 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%. That's 1, 1, 1, 1 before, and then you do it. So you weigh that in. So you bias your set in the sense of, I think nucleotides happen equally. Is that true? Well, here they are. How true was that? It's not really true. See, if you read this data, it's not really 25% for each. It's different. Okay, that's your prior. That's your best guess when you start. And here you could say, now I really have a prior probability. And you weigh these pseudo counts in another way. You can make the weight a bit more. You could, for example, say, you know what? You could do here. Pseudo counts, I don't give them all 1 point for a start. 100 points each. How would that work out, you think? You would have got here 100 divided by what? 130. No, 430. Different, right? So then it all becomes more like quarter if you do that, because the weight of your pseudo counts is far more. So this is about this. You can weight it. And here, what you see, this is the weight you take. If the weight is 8, here you say, okay, given a uniform priors, that's just saying each letter happens equally likely, 0.25 for each of them, then you get this. It's the pseudo count. Yeah? Just a more. So this is all the same thing. You give them points beforehand, prior probability. You count. You avoid your zero problem. That's the important thing, right? Okay, pseudo counts. Anyway, let's quickly go now to the real CPG islands. So how did they do this? And you've seen this type of scoring more, right? You take a ratio. Guys, if you talk and you want to talk that loudly, do it at that side of the door, okay? And otherwise you don't disturb yours. Okay, so here you have, what is this? This is again, statistician would say this. What do you need? You have your model, your Markov model for CPG. You have a Markov model for not CPG. And you take the ratio, you take a log to make it really scientific. Remember that? Okay, so that's how you could score it. And then the question is, okay, and this is how Durbin does it in the chapter, in the book, chapter 3 in his book. You can read about this. And they could say, yeah, well, but how does this relate to Bayes and statistics, really? Here we go. Bayes tells you that the CPG model, given a sequence, would be, remember, the reversal x given that other thing times the prior, divided by the marginal probability, your x, for both of them, for your CPG model and for your null model. And then we take the ratio of those two. So what falls out of the equation if you take the ratio of this model divided by that, here? I can tell you, the PRX drops out. Mathematicians will tell you, they may not be zero, you know that, right? But then you can scratch them out. That's good. And then you say, look, and then Durbin becomes a bit sloppy in a sense, or that's what even mathematicians do. Then you say, we disregard priors, put them to 1, whatever, so we don't need to look at this anymore, and then you're at this. So basically what you say is, I divide the two things, I just use this and this. This falls out of the equation if you divide them, and this I won't take into account. Then you get it. Now, if you do that, and here's some real data from real sequences fed into these models. Read the chapter if you want some background. So here are the sequences that were taken. This is the basic Markov model. It's a simple one. Not even a side. You see that? But it's Markov. You really know where you are. For the CPG model they made, this model. For the the null model, they made a model. And these are the scores for an A following an A, and here you have a G following a C, and here you have a G following a C. You see the difference, by the way? This is what you expect outside gene regions. You see the probability, G fold, and here do you see? Would it be something? It's the idea. Right? You want to do something there. So how do they do this? They use this ratio. So how would it work out? You need to divide these two matrices. This is then the score for the G's following the CPG islands. This is the comparison. So the CPG model and the null model. And here get what you get if you do all of this. Go over the sequences, the training sequences, fill it in, have these two. Then you get, if you see a G following a C, a CPG island, that will, for each island, evaluate in this score. What does that mean? It's the highest in the matrix. It means if you see CG, the model says, I like you. The score for the sequence goes up. See another one. I like you even more. The score goes up. That's how you. So this is a way to train. Okay, so that is how you could do it. But this is basically done in a simple-minded. How would this work in practice? You have a long DNA sequence that could have a whole region that is not CPG, no gene, outside the gene area. You don't know. So very low CPG. Then you go without you knowing, perhaps in a region where the gene is. CPG up, and then down again. So how do you discern, how do you do this? So if you do the simple man's approach, language is fair, I'm thinking, but it's never a simple woman's approach, right? There's only simple man's approach. That's a fair thing in language. Anyway, So you could use a window size of 100 and say, okay, I just slice it. First 100, see what's the score for CPG. Second, third. What would be the problem if you do this? That in your window, in fact, you have part of a non-region, non-gene region, and part gene region. How could you deal with that? So your book has thought about this, or the authors of the book, and that's what is stated here. So basically, they now say, you know what? We're going to make this model. My question to you is this Markov or hidden Markov? But this is the idea. You have a model with these 4 states for the CPG's region of the sequence, and you have the null model for the non-CPG region in your input sequence, and hopefully somehow there is a transition. You go from non-CPG to a CPG region, and you should hop over from the plus model to the minus model, or the other way around, right? You're getting into a CPG region, you should go from the negative to the CPG model, you get out of a CPG region into a normal region, you should hop back. By the way, this is a model that has all kinds of transition probabilities, but this is just the many ways to go from one model to the other, right? All possibilities. See that? Okay, so let's see. So what should you know to be able to hop over? Well, you should know your last symbol in a model. So you should know that last symbol. You should know where was I? Was I in the plus or in the minus? Then you can hop over. So that's what you need to know. Basically, if you want to use it like this. So, but my basic question is, if you don't know these pluses and minuses, you don't know where, what is this? What model is this? Is this Markov? Are you absolutely sure if you see an A where you are? No, you don't know anymore, right? What is this? A Markov model or a hidden Markov model? I told some students, like, you'll get a model where you will say, this is in fact hidden Markov. If you're not sure anymore in what stage you are, that's it. Anyway, you're as close to Markov as you could possibly be, of course. But anyway, okay. And this is basically how they do it. So, okay, so that's one way you can read in the book. That, you know, there are all kinds, what I'm trying to tell you here, all ways of, you know, hidden Markov or Markov is a big box, a toolbox. You can shape your models in any way you like. That's the beauty. And I'll show you a few more ingredients of the toolbox in a moment. So this is all what you can do. You could resort to a 4 complete hidden Markov model immediately and so on. Okay, higher order Markov chain. So far, we only needed to remember the last letter. And then we knew the probability. Is that, so that's what you'll have. So, and there are other possibilities that you would remember deeper. More memory, perhaps. So you can have a second order Markov model. What would that mean? For the letter I'm in now, I should not only know the letter before, but the last 2 letters. That gives me information. More possibilities, obviously. So you can do all of that stuff. So basically, would that give me more predictive strength, power? So let's take Silliman's example again. You know, say we have the sentence, what was it again? Fast, where is it? Sorry. So this sentence, where is it? Okay, yes. That was out. So finish something. You can finish up, you can finish it, you can finish first, you can finish last, right? What's the likelihood of up, it, first or last? Tell me. Do you know? What would your prior be? Quarter, 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 quarter? How's your prior now? Fast guys finish up? Well, what would happen with the likelihood of the words? I think the word first should have a higher probability. If you agree, then we agree. So you see, history, you just have guys finish here, but the word fast guys is more history, give you more information, so you know better what you should have. That's the idea of having deeper memory. Okay, so there we go. Let's do some deeper memory. And you know what? In DNA business, you know, 2 codons, 6 letters have an added advantage in many practical cases. So you'll see that a lot of models, a lot of stuff is about dipeptides, 2 codons, 6 DNA letters evaluating to 2 protein letters, right? So if you want to build that in, the fifth, and you're about strings of 6, talk about the fifth order Markov chain, meaning you have a letter and you need to remember the last 5 to get it at 6. Question?
Are you in higher Markov chains also looking at all the possibilities of the lower chains?
That's the next step. Not now. Now we just say, if we are fifth order, we say, we always remember the 5 in the past. Yeah? Hold on, park this question. So how would this go? Then you say, okay, now I don't talk about the probability of C given there was a G before. You now talk about the probability of a C given that there was G, C, T, A, C before, right? 5 letters. There's more past, more to remember. But you can do this. And a lot of models do it like that. Your question is being answered already now. You're being served, sir. Okay, so, because maybe we should show you this slide. Where is that slide? No, let's do it. Otherwise I make a bigger mess. Okay, there was a question on this. Somebody should now be happy. Yeah, one happy person. Okay. It was a very good question, like, hey, hold on, in DNA, there is very often, we know for proteins, there is codons. You remember? Codon, 3 positions, translating into an amino acid at protein level. And we know that the frequencies of these letters are different in each of the codon positions. And the question was, would there be a way of keeping track? I was very happy with this question because there are slides in my lecture on these questions, really are. And so this is what you do. This could be a hidden Markov model. Is it Markov or hidden Markov? What is it? What is this? Do you know what stage you are? Yes, I think so. Yeah, don't be shy. Yeah, it's just Markov. If you feel Markov, you say Markov. Okay. All right. So anyway, sorry, the slide that was on. And I wanted to do this. So here you are. So these are the first position in the codon, the second position in the codon, and the third position in the codon. This is for predicting, protein sequence from DNA, say, whatever, something like that. And how do you go through the model? You start somewhere. You have to walk per codon, so you go 1, 2, 3, back to 1. Yeah? Could you put in a frame shift here, by the way? What would that happen?
Then it would be hidden?
Yeah, not necessarily, could be. But what does that mean? How could you, when you have a deletion of a letter, how would you have to, you get a shift. Then, here you always jump back to the first of the codon. So if you have frame shifts, you should maybe build in something to jump back not to the first, but sometimes to the second. I'm making it overly complicated too. So, anyway. Okay, so this is a so-called why is it called inhomogeneous? For these positions, you get different statistics basically, different distributions. That makes it inhomogeneous. Okay, it's just a difficult sounding word or something. And then we have the combination of the last two. Why not having an inhomogeneous model that has a bit more memory? I told you in the DNA business we like dipeptides, so very often models out of this structure could be done. Ready? I hope not. Okay, so we have to speed up tremendously. Come in.
Go 1 minute.
Yeah, I don't care so much. I will take a few more because I've been brief the last few lectures. Okay, so I do pick an example. What happens if you use more memory? Instead of observing a single letter in your memory for a first order, you might go to an 8th order, or what have we got here, an 8th order. So you need to remember at least 7 letters, right? That means the things you need to count in your database is a string of 7 letters. T, A, C, C, T, whatever. 8 letters. How many times would that occur compared to the letter A or C? Well, the answer is, the longer your history you use, fast guys finish first, you have better predictability, but your data won't give it to you. That's the drawback. Some motifs you need to memorize are not hardly there. So here's just an example. 72,000 for each word. How long? Second order of too long. 27,000. 72,000 times. If you go to 8, only 5 times. You don't have the data anymore. Nasty. What are we going to do? Best of both worlds again. Yes. Interpolated Markov models, okay? And I'll gloss over a little bit. I'm going to give you an example and then we run out of this room because these guys want to talk to you, I think. They're all here in frightful numbers. So, interpolated markov chains. The idea is, if we have some sequence that is of 8 very many times in the database, that's great, we can use it. If for another letter, that is not so often there, you say, I go to a second order. So we start mixing the order. Here there's hardly data, we go to first order. Here in this corner there's a lot of data, I go to 8th order, and I mix these things. You start mixing it, and you mix it with a given parameter. You mix the first order or the 0 order with lambda 0, the first order is the first order, the one you've seen many times. And you have to, of course, to find these parameters. Right? Then you can execute it like that. You can weigh in different kinds of memory, if you like, order into your equation. And of course, statistics demand that total probability event should be 1. Okay, let's give you a feel. A script, you can read it. Why is this all important? What do we want to do? In this bit of biology, look at these codons. Are they all happening in the same way? No, they're not. These are the codons that will give rise to a glycine, an amino acid. In a protein, these are the codons that encode this glycine, and look how different. Is this mammals, or is this? No, this is an E. coli. Yeah, and here for glue, same thing. You see quite different frequencies of the possible codons. There is codon bias in different organisms, right? Okay, so what can we do? So this is used, codon bias could be used, if you know that the letter GAC happens a lot in E. coli in a gene, hey, it could be used. I see a lot of GAC. That might be a gene then. So that's the idea, and there are models doing this, and this you read at home, as the text suggests, no time really to walk through this. Can all do this at home, if not. So, anyway, let's go try the last bit here. The method I'm talking about is Glimmer, Salzburg, widely used to predict bacterial genes, regions. So this model starts firing when it's likely that in the bacterial seed you feed it a big DNA sequence, and it says, if this is E. coli, this is, or prokaryote, this is the gene region. How does it do that? It mixes an 8th order inhomogeneous, interpolated, there you go. This is the full body, full-bodied Markov model. So it mixes, it's 8th order, it looks 8 into history. Basically 3 codons, not 2 but 3 codons, right? 8 plus 1 for the letter itself. It's inhomogeneous. It's per position, remember. It's codon, first position, second, and it's interpolated. You not only use 8th order memory, but if you don't have the data, you go to lower order memory. How does that work? Here you go. This is all the math. There's a method for now. What's the trick? They compare. They say, what if I use an 8th order model? And I predict, and I use an order less, 7 order. What do you know? You have in fact more memory if you use 8, but probably less data. I want to find out what should I choose. Should I go for more data, less memory, or in this instance for more memory? You decide this by a statistical thing called I'm even lost. What's it called? Help me, Bas. This is chi-square. Thank you very much. Somehow I didn't cross my brain anymore. The chi-square. Here you go. There's the chi-square test. That's the name of the statistical test. It's just this. Basically, what we do. I gloss over this, I agree. What do? We have all these possibilities. Should I go to 2nd order, 3rd order, 4th order, 5th order, to 8? And you say, if I see a word 400 times or more, that's enough. If I see 8 or 7 letters more than 400 times, I say, that's enough data. I believe this, I go to the 8th order. If not, I look at, okay, it's not 400, but it's still 100. Should I go to the 5th or the 6th order? You decide based on this comparison in the chi-test. And if this letter is high, it means you go to the lower. You say, okay, there is hardly any more sensitivity going to more memory. I go to 1 less memory because of more data. That's the reason. It's just plain reasoning here. And this is how they do it. Now, you can look at home how this really works. You've seen this type of slides, I think, you know this. don't know this by now, I start crying, and not because I'm happy. Alright, and this is then, you predict something, and this is the real situation, so what have we got? How do we call this region here? A false positive, right? Predicted but not real. Or how was it? Incorrect, I'm testing you. False negative. Where's the false positive? Yeah, right? How is this called? True. Words on the top, right? Did you see that? That's not so hard to understand. Okay. Very good. Anyway, and these are the numbers. So, of course, and I told you this, right? The guys doing tests in their own papers, the method is always fabulous. Much better than the neighbors. I don't know how that is, but it's psychology. Anyway, this is what they made of it. They're really much better. So they compare themselves, an 8th-order interpolated inhomogeneous model against just a 5th-order Markov model. And they're better, they claim. Beautiful, right? Anyway, this is a method that is widely used, and they also have a flavor for eukaryotes. Okay, have you got the idea that this is about probabilities? Markov? Good. The bookkeeping is important. You have a pathway and you need to faithfully take all the probabilities. And you know what happens if any probability gets 0? What happens to the product probability? It will be 0. Did we have that problem before? How will these probabilities be, by the way? They're all small numbers. We're going to take the product of very small probabilities. What happens? What can the computer do? It gets to 0, right? Or near 0. Basically, we should take the log again, like we did before. You know what? In the models you're using during the coming 2 weeks are small enough. You don't need to go into the trouble of logging the values. You really work with real probabilities this time. Are you happy now? Okay. That's the idea. Yeah, so you take the product, right? Not the image. Any more questions? We had many? No, you're tired now, right? So that's why I've lost time. Okay, so that's it, I think. Where are we? Oops, we'll be kicked out. I don't know that or not. So, gentlemen.
Before everyone runs out, while you're all grouped up, I'd like to briefly introduce a paper assignment for the hidden Markov model practical that starts today. I'm going to hand out stacks of these. Please take one and pass them on to the back. Share with your neighbours as well, because there's only 3 stacks. Yes. Thank you. Alright, so if I'm not mistaken, hidden Markov models are on the menu for Friday?
I have talked about Friday, but today they start. I told them already.
It's 2 pages. It's 2 pages.
Two pages. Very briefly introduced hidden Markov. They know about transition probabilities, emission probabilities. We talked about pathways. I've explained the hidden aspects. But I didn't explain the trellis and the viterbi yet.
So the trellis is new. Alright, so very much as with the dynamic program exercise, there is a trick to coming up with a score for this hidden Markov model thing. Given a sequence or a set of sequences, you can fill out a matrix, again with a dynamic aspect to it, to compute the score or the probability that a certain sequence was produced by a given model. Now there's a couple of different algorithms we will use for this. I think we start with viterbi, or is it a forward algorithm? Right. So we start with viterbi. Is there any questions?
No, there isn't.
No questions.
I wrote with this on the blackboard. They very much impressed. Very clear font.
Kijk eens op het...
So we need to take...
daar ergens achter de beeldscherm.
Doesn't matter. Okay. So, what you've done with dynamic programming for assignment 1 is that every cell you fill in a score matrix depends on the cell to its top, to its left, and on its diagonal.
So from how many cells could you come? 3.
Yes. There's a slight difference with hidden Markov models in that every cell that you fill in depends on the values from the whole column in front of it. So, as you will find out later today, in a couple of minutes, the number of cells that you could have come from equals the number of states in your model.
Does that make sense to you? Think
I would draw it on the board.
4 letters, right? 4 states. Yeah, I wanted to draw that, but I could show you a picture here, Bas. That's much better. No, here. This should do it. This should do it. We go back to. Oh my God. Maybe we should go out and in again, but we'll get there eventually.
This.
Here we go.
had it
close,
just
getting
now.
close. I hope.
Yes.
Getting close. Much better, I have much better picture for you, but there we go. Hold on. Yeah! No, mark off. Ah, there we are. You like this one?
No.
You don't? We do. So if you are in C or T, from how many states could you come? Is that 3 like in dynamic programming? No, it's basically how many? 4 other states, right? And this guy, same thing. Also
right?
4.
5.
It can come from
Including the
Oh,
beginning.
including self. Oh, you're so clever. Sorry.
So begin en zelf.
van beginnen.
So the trick to filling out your score matrices is that for every step you transition once and you emit the symbol corresponding to the column that you're in. This is why I already gave you the paper, because if you look at that, it makes more sense. To come up with, well, this is actually a very helpful picture. Thank you. Suppose you start in this state, and there is 4 other states you can be in outside of the end state. Then there is a probability of transitioning from beginning to either 1 or 2 of 0.5. And in these states, the probability of emitting an A is 0.4 each. So who can tell me the probability of a single letter sequence given this hidden Markov model? So you transition into a state, you emit an A, and then you transmit again into the end state. Yes, trick question. You can't go from these into the end state. So what is the shortest possible sequence that you can produce given this model? Good. Yes, we have to run out because the next group has booked this room. More to this in the seminar room.